Real Fideikommiss, Dux Oberleutensdorf, Handschriftlicher Nachlass Casanova. The cases were arranged so as to stand like books. They opened at the side, and on opening them, one after another, I found series after series of manuscripts, roughly thrown together, after some pretence at arrangement, and lettered with a very generalized description of contents. The greater part of the manuscripts were in Casanova's handwriting, which I could see gradually beginning to get shaky with years. Most were written in French, a certain number in Italian. The beginning of a catalogue in the library, though said to be by him, was not in his handwriting. Perhaps it was taken down at his dictation. There were also some copies of Italian and Latin poems not written by him. Then there were many big bundles of letters addressed to him, dating over more than 30 years. Almost all the rest was in his own handwriting. I came first upon the smaller manuscripts, among which I found, jumbled together on the same and on separate scraps of paper, washing bills, accounts, hotel bills, lists of letters written, first drafts of letters with many erasures, notes on books, theological and mathematical notes, sums, Latin quotations, French and Italian verses with variants, a long list of classical names which have and have not been francisés, with reasons for and against, what I must wear at Dresden, headings without anything to follow, such as Reflections on Respiration, on the True Cause of Youth, the Crows, a new method of winning the lottery at Rome, recipes, among which is a long printed list of perfumes sold at Spa, a newspaper cutting dated Prague, 25th October 1790, on the 37th balloon ascent of Blanchard, thanks to some noble donor for the gift of a dog called Finette, a passport for Monsieur de Casanova, Venetian, allant d'ici en Hollande, October 13th, 1758. Ce passeport bon pour 15 jours. Together with an order for post horses, gratis, from Paris to Bordeaux and Bayonne. Occasionally one gets a glimpse into his daily life at Dux, as in this note, scribbled on a fragment of paper. Here, and always, I translate the French literally. I beg you to tell my servant what the biscuits are that I like to eat, dipped in wine, to fortify my stomach. I believe that they can all be found at Romans. Usually, however, these notes, though often suggested by something closely personal, branch off into more general considerations, or else begin with general considerations and end with a case in point. Thus, for instance, a fragment of 3 pages begins, "A compliment which is only made to gild the pill is a positive impertinence, and Monsieur Bailly is nothing but a charlatan. The monarch ought to have spit in his face, but the monarch trembled with fear." A manuscript entitled Essai d'égoïsme, dated Dux, this 27th June, 1769, contains in the midst of various reflections an offer to let his appartement in return for enough money to tranquillize for 6 months 2 Jew creditors at Prague. Another manuscript is headed Pride and Folly, and begins with a long series of antitheses, such as All fools are not proud, and all proud men are fools. Many fools are happy, all proud men are unhappy. On the same sheet follows this instance or application. Whether it is possible to compose a Latin distich of the greatest beauty without knowing either the Latin language or prosody? We must examine the possibility and the impossibility, and afterwards see who is the man who says he is the author of the distich, for there are extraordinary people in the world. My brother, in short, ought to have composed the distich, because he says so, and because he confided it to me tête-à-tête. I had, it is true, difficulty in believing him, but what is one to do? Either one must believe, or suppose him capable of telling a lie which could only be told by a fool, and that is impossible, for all Europe knows that my brother is not a fool. Here, as so often in these manuscripts, we seem to see Casanova thinking on paper. He uses scraps of paper, sometimes the blank page of a letter, on the other side of which we see the address, as a kind of informal diary, and it is characteristic of him, of the man of infinitely curious mind which this adventurer really was, that there are so few merely personal notes among these casual jottings. Often they are purely abstract, at times metaphysical jeux d'esprit, like the sheet of 14 different wagers which begins, "I wager that it is not true that a man who weighs 100 pounds will weigh more if you kill him. I wager that if there is any difference he will weigh less. I wager that diamond powder has not sufficient force to kill a man." Side by side with these fanciful excursions into science come more serious ones, as in the note on algebra, which traces its progress since the year 1494, before which it had only arrived at the solution of problems of the second degree inclusive. A scrap of paper tells us that Casanova did not like regular towns. "I like," he says, "Venice, Rome, Florence, Milan, Constantinople, Genoa." Then he becomes abstract and inquisitive again, and writes 2 pages full of curious out-of-the-way learning on the name of Paradise. The name of Paradise is a name in Genesis which indicates a place of pleasure, lieu voluptueux. This term is Persian. This place of pleasure was made by God before he had created man. It may be remembered that Casanova quarrelled with Voltaire, because Voltaire had told him frankly that his translation of L'Écossaise was a bad translation. It is piquant to read another note written in this style of righteous indignation. "Voltaire, the hardy Voltaire, whose pen is without bit or bridle. Voltaire, who devoured the Bible, and ridiculed our dogmas, doubts, and after having made proselytes to impiety, is not ashamed, being reduced to the extremity of life, to ask for the sacraments, and to cover his body with more relics than Saint Louis had at Amboise." Here is an argument more in keeping with the tone of the Memoirs. "A girl who is pretty and good, and as virtuous as you please, ought not to take it ill that a man, carried away by her charms, should set himself to the task of making their conquest. If this man cannot please her by any means, even if his passion be criminal, she ought never to take offence at it, nor treat him unkindly. She ought to be gentle, and pity him, if she does not love him, and think it enough to keep invincibly hold upon her own duty." Occasionally he touches upon aesthetical matters, as in a fragment which begins with this liberal definition of beauty. "Harmony makes beauty," says Monsieur de S. P., Bernardin de Saint-Pierre, but the definition is too short if he thinks he has said everything. Here is mine. Remember that the subject is metaphysical. An object really beautiful ought to seem beautiful to all whose eyes fall upon it. That is all. There is nothing more to be said. At times we have an anecdote and its commentary, perhaps jotted down for use in that latter part of the Memoirs which was never written, or which has been lost. Here is a single sheet, dated this 2nd September 1791, and headed Souvenir. "The Prince de Rosenberg said to me, as we went downstairs, that Madame de Rosenberg was dead, and asked me if the Comte de Waldstein had in the library the illustration of the Villa d'Altichiero, which the Emperor had asked for in vain at the City Library of Prague, and when I answered yes, he gave an equivocal laugh. A moment afterwards he asked me if he might tell the Emperor. 'Why not, monseigneur? It is not a secret. Is his Majesty coming to Dux?' 'If he goes to the Oberleitensdorf, he will go to Dux too, and he may ask you for it, for there is a monument there which relates to him when he was Grand Duke. In that case, his Majesty can also see my critical remarks on the Egyptian prince.' The Emperor asked me this morning, 6th of October, how I employed my time at Dux, and I told him that I was making an Italian anthology. 'You have all the Italians, then?' 'All, sire. See what a lie leads to. If I had not lied in saying that I was making an anthology, I should not have found myself obliged to lie again in saying that we have all the Italian poets. If the Emperor comes to Dux, I shall kill myself.